thought it would be the perfect revenge. The woman who once left him struggling, humiliated, and broken would now have to sit and watch him marry someone richer, younger, and more beautiful. That was the plan. But what Daniel didn't know was that the woman he called poor and desperate had built an empire, one that made his entire world look small. And when she walked into his wedding, dressed like power, grace, and vengeance itself, every guest in that hall realized this wasn't his day anymore. It was hers. What drives a man to humiliate someone he once loved? What turns heartbreak into arrogance and loss into revenge? And most importantly, how did a once broken woman rise from poverty to power, only to stand face to face with a man who betrayed her? This is a story of Daniel and Claire, a story of love, betrayal, and poetic justice. Stay with me. Before the money, before the heartbreak, there was love. Daniel and Claire met in university. Two dreamers from opposite worlds. Daniel, ambitious, but from a middle-class background. Claire, quiet, kind, and raised by her grandmother in a small village. They met in a library. A cliché, perhaps, but one that mattered. He helped her with her business coursework. She helped him with his essays. And soon, what began as friendship turned into something deeper. They had big dreams to start a company together, build a life, travel the world, but reality had other plans. When Daniel graduated, job offers didn't come easily. Claire, despite her degree, worked two jobs. One at a diner, one cleaning offices. Together they survived. Barely. Bills piled up. Stress grew. Arguments became normal. And when Daniel finally got an offer from a company in the city, he took it. But the city changed him. Daniel at sleek corporate events. Claire at home, counting bills. Claire wanted to believe in him, but slowly calls became fewer. Dates canceled. Affection faded until one evening. Daniel came home and said 6 words that would haunt her for years. "I can't live like this anymore." He blamed her for holding him back, not just once in the heat of an argument, but repeatedly, methodically, with the kind of cruelty that only comes from someone who's already made up their mind. He said she had no ambition, that while he was climbing the corporate ladder, she was content to stay on the ground floor, that her dreams were too small, her vision too narrow, her goals too ordinary. He said she had no style, that her simple dresses and modest wardrobe embarrassed him at company events, that when colleagues asked about his girlfriend, he found himself making excuses instead of introductions. He said she had no class, that she couldn't navigate the rooms he needed to navigate, that she didn't understand the game he was trying to play, that she was, in his exact words, a weight around his ankle while he was trying to swim. The words didn't just sting. They carved themselves into her bones. They echoed in the silence of sleepless nights. They played on repeat every time she looked in the mirror, the quiet goodbye. But Claire didn't fight. She didn't scream or plead or ask him to reconsider. She didn't throw things or slam doors or demand answers to questions she already knew. Because somewhere deep inside, beneath the pain and humiliation, Claire understood something Daniel didn't. You can't convince someone to see your worth. They either see it or they don't deserve the view. So she let him go. She walked out of that cramped apartment, the one they'd shared for 3 years, where they'd laughed and dreamed and promised each other forever, with nothing but a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. No furniture, no claims, no drama, just one duffel bag and the faint, flickering hope that one day, somehow, she'd matter again. Not to him, to herself. Daniel's new chapter. Daniel didn't waste time looking back. Why would he? In his mind, he'd shed dead weight. He'd made the tough but necessary choice. He prioritized his future over nostalgia. Within weeks, he was dating again. Within months, he was in a relationship. And a year later, almost the day he told Claire she was enough, he was all over social media, living his best life with Amanda. Amanda, the daughter of Marcus Whitfield, the real estate tycoon whose name appeared on buildings across 3 states. Amanda, who wore designer labels like a second skin and spoke 3 languages fluently. Amanda, who had the pedigree, the connections, the polish that Daniel had always craved. His Instagram became a highlight reel. Charity galas, yacht parties, exclusive restaurant openings, weekend trips to Aspen and the Hamptons. Every photo was a statement. See, I upgraded. I chose right. And in the comments, old friends congratulated him. Colleagues liked his posts. His family welcomed Amanda with open arms. Claire's name was never mentioned. It was like she'd been erased. The disappearance. Meanwhile, Claire vanished, not dramatically, not in a way that made headlines or sparked rumors. She simply stopped existing in their shared circles. Her social media went dark. Her phone number changed. Her friends, the few who stayed neutral during the breakup, said she'd taken a job abroad. Something vague about consulting work in Southeast Asia. Others whispered darker theories, that she had a breakdown, that the breakup had destroyed her, that she'd given up on life entirely and moved back to her hometown to live with her parents. Some said they'd heard she was working 2 jobs just to make rent. Others said they'd seen her at a bus stop at 6 a.m., looking exhausted and defeated. Daniel, on the rare occasions he thought about her, assumed she was struggling, probably waitressing again, maybe regretting that she hadn't tried harder to keep him. He never imagined the truth, because the truth was far more surprising. The chance encounter. Claire had found something, or rather, someone, a person who saw past a wrinkled uniform and tired eyes, past a heartbreak and self-doubt, and glimpsed something Daniel had completely missed. Potential. Her name was Mrs. Eleanor Carter, 73 years old. Silver hair always pulled into an elegant bun. Sharp eyes that had evaluated thousands of investments over a 40-year career on Wall Street. Retired now, but still sharp as a blade. Mrs. Carter had been a regular at the diner, where Claire worked during her lowest point. That grimy 24-hour place near the bus station, where desperate people came for cheap coffee and cheaper hope. Most customers never looked twice at their servers, but Mrs. Carter watched. She noticed how Claire organized the chaos during the morning rush, how she remembered regulars' orders without writing them down, how she suggested menu modifications that increased ticket averages. And one morning, after weeks of observation, Mrs. Carter had asked a simple question. If you could start any business tomorrow with unlimited resources, what would you build? Claire had laughed nervously, assuming it was small talk, but Mrs. Carter repeated the question, dead serious. So Claire told her about the clothing line she'd sketched in notebooks in high school, about her ideas for affordable luxury, pieces that made working women feel powerful without destroying their budgets, about her vision for ethical manufacturing and inclusive sizing, about dreams. She stopped saying out loud because Daniel called him cute in that dismissive tone that meant childish. Mrs. Carter listened to every word, and then she said, "Let's have lunch, a real lunch, not here, the education." What followed was an apprenticeship disguised as mentorship. Mrs. Carter didn't hand Claire money. She handed her knowledge, finance, cash flow management, profit margins and loss projections, e-commerce platforms, digital marketing, SEO and social media algorithms, brand building, brand positioning, psychology of luxury, supply chain logistics, manufacturing partnerships, quality control, legal structures, intellectual property, contracts, and negotiations. Claire learned fast, faster than Mrs. Carter had anticipated, because Claire wasn't learning as a hobby. She was learning like her life depended on it. Every evening after her diner shift, she studied. Every weekend, she took calls with manufacturers. Every spare dollar went into building prototypes. She slept 4 hours a night for 2 years straight. Within 3 years, she launched her online fashion line from Mrs. Carter's guest house. The first year, $200,000 in revenue. The second year, $2.3 million. By year 5, Claire Lauron, the brand she named after her grandmother, had become a household name in accessible luxury wear. Celebrities started wearing her designs. Fashion magazines featured her collections. Retail chains begged for exclusive partnerships. And by year 8, Claire's net worth crossed $1.2 billion. The quiet queen. But here's what made Claire different from most success stories. She lived quietly. No flashy headlines announcing her wealth. No reality TV appearances or influencer antics. No scandals or publicity stunts. She gave to charity anonymously. She mentored young entrepreneurs privately. She kept her personal life off social media entirely. Most people who wore her clothes had no idea what the founder looked like. She'd learned from Daniel's mistake. True power doesn't need to announce itself, the invitation, until one ordinary Tuesday morning. Claire was reviewing quarterly projections in her Manhattan office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, a far cry from that cramped apartment, when her assistant forwarded an email, a wedding invitation, cream-colored digital card with elegant script and a familiar name. Daniel and Amanda request the pleasure of your company. Claire stared at the screen. After 8 years of silence, Daniel had found her, and he was inviting her to watch him marry the woman he'd left her for. The question was simple. Would she go? And if she did, what would Daniel see when he finally looked at the woman he'd once called worthless? The answer would change everything. If you're still watching right now, comment, "I'm still here." Let's see who's really following the story. Because trust me, what happens next is unbelievable. Daniel's wedding wasn't just an event. It was a production, a spectacle designed to announce to the world and to himself that he had arrived. The venue, the Imperial Grand Hotel. Not just any luxury hotel, but the Imperial Grand, the crown jewel of the city's hospitality scene. The place where tech billionaires hosted product launches, where foreign dignitaries stayed during state visits, where a single night in the presidential suite cost more than most people's monthly rent. 20-foot ceilings adorned with Venetian chandeliers, marble floors imported from Italian quarries, a ballroom that had hosted presidents, celebrities, and royalty. This was where Daniel chose to marry Amanda. The guest list read like a who's who of the city's elite, 500 people, corporate executives from Daniel's firm, Amanda's society friends who never worked a day in their lives but sat on charity boards, influencers with millions of followers, local news personalities, old college friends Daniel hadn't spoken to in years, but suddenly needed to impress. The invitations alone cost $75 each. Heavy cardstock with gold leaf embossing and hand-tied silk ribbons. The flower budget exceeded 6 figures. There would be a 12-piece orchestra, a celebrity DJ for the after-party, and a champagne fountain flowing with Dom Perignon. This wasn't about love. This was about legacy, about status, about proving something to everyone who'd ever doubted him, the strategic guest. But among those 500 names, one stood out. One name that didn't belong in the sea of success stories and trust funds. Claire Mitchell. Daniel's assistant had questioned it. "Sir, I don't see her RSVP information in our system. Should I add her?" Daniel had said, his voice carrying that edge of satisfaction. "Find her. She needs to be there." It took his assistant 3 days to locate Claire's contact information. She'd changed everything. Her phone, her email, her address. But money buys access, and eventually they found professional email through some obscure business registry. The invitation was sent, and Daniel waited. The twisted fantasy in Daniel's mind. He'd already written the script of how this would unfold. He imagined Claire receiving that cream-colored envelope at whatever modest apartment she was struggling to afford. He imagined her hands shaking as she read it, her heart sinking. He pictured her debating what had come, pride warring with curiosity, hurt battling with the masochistic need to see what could have been hers. And he imagined her arriving in a cheap dress from some discount retailer, probably black because it's slimming and versatile. The kind of dress that screams, "I'm trying my best with limited resources." Maybe she borrowed jewelry from a friend. Maybe she'd done her own makeup in a bathroom mirror, watching YouTube tutorials because she couldn't afford professional. He saw her entering the ballroom, overwhelmed by the grandeur, shrinking against the walls, finding a seat at the back, somewhere in the shadows where the important people wouldn't notice her, where she could observe without being observed, sitting through the ceremony with tears in her eyes, not tears of joy, but tears of regret, realizing what she'd lost, understanding, finally, that Daniel had been right all along, that she was enough, that he'd made the correct choice. And maybe, if he was feeling particularly generous after a few drinks, he'd find her during the reception. He'd introduce her to Amanda with carefully crafted politeness. This is Claire, an old friend from way back. Old friend, not girlfriend. Not the woman who supported him through his worst moments. Just an old friend. Ancient history. A footnote. And Amanda would shake Claire's hand with that pitying smile wealthy women give to those they perceive as less fortunate. And Claire would smile back weakly and congratulate the man, then disappear into the night. Daniel would watch her leave, defeated, diminished, invisible, and feel that final validation. I chose correctly. I won what he didn't know. But what Daniel didn't know, what he couldn't know because his arrogance had made him blind, was that the tables hadn't just turned. They'd been completely rebuilt in a different room. While Daniel had been busy curating his Instagram perfect life and climbing middle management, a firm where he'd likely plateau in 5 years, Claire had been building an empire. While he'd been attending networking events and golf outings with Amanda's father's friends, Claire had been closing deals with manufacturing partners across 3 continents. While he'd been measuring his worth in luxury car leases and country club memberships, Claire had been accumulating actual wealth, generational wealth. Daniel assumed Claire was still the woman he'd left, broke, defeated, struggling. He had no idea she'd become a woman he could never be, and he was about to find out in the most public way possible. The decision. When Claire received the invitation, she stared at it for a long time. Her assistant, Jennifer, a sharp woman in her 30s who'd been with Claire since year 2, had been furious. "You're not actually considering going to this, are you?" Jennifer had demanded, pacing Claire's office. "He abandoned you. He humiliated you. And now he has the audacity to invite you to watch him marry someone else. This is a power play. Claire, he wants to rub your face in it." Claire had remained quiet, turning the invitation over in her hands. "Don't give him the satisfaction," Jennifer continued. "Send a polite decline. Better yet, don't respond at all. Let him wonder. That's the real power move." But Claire shook her head slowly. "I'm going," she said softly. "Why?" Jennifer's voice cracked with protective anger. "Why would you do that to yourself?" Claire looked up, and Jennifer saw something in her eyes that surprised her. Not pain, not anger, not even satisfaction. "Peace, because I need to," Claire said simply. "Not for revenge, Jen, for closure." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "For 8 years, I've been running, building, yes, succeeding, yes, but also running from a memory of who I was when he left me, from the shame I carried, from the question of whether he was right about me." Her voice grew stronger. "I need to go back, not to prove anything to him, to prove something to myself, that I can walk into that room not as the woman he destroyed, but as the woman I became despite him, that his opinion of me has no power anymore." Jennifer studied her boss, then slowly nodded. "Okay," she said quietly. "Then let's make sure you arrive the right way." Claire smiled. "I already have an idea. The preparation." Claire didn't just RSVP. She booked the grand presidential suite at the Imperial Grand Hotel, the same hotel hosting the wedding. 4,000 square feet on the top floor, private elevator access, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, a price tag of $15,000 per night. She arrived 2 days before the wedding, not secretly or quietly, but through the front entrance where the hotel's general manager personally greeted her. Because when Claire Laurent founder of one of the fastest growing luxury brands in the country, books your top suite, you greet her yourself. "MS, Laurent, it's an honor to have you with us," he'd said, practically bowing. The staff had been briefed. Extra security, complete privacy, anything she needed whenever she needed it. Her team arrived the next day. Her stylist, Marcus, who dressed A-list celebrities and had flown in from Milan specifically for this. Her hair and makeup team, the same people who'd worked on magazine covers and award show red carpets. Her attorney, her publicist, and Jennifer, who coordinated everything with military precision. This wasn't about revenge, but it was about making a statement. The morning of, the wedding was scheduled for 6 p.m. Claire woke at 10 a.m. in that palace of sweet, sunlight streaming through the windows. She had breakfast on the terrace. Fresh fruit, perfectly brewed coffee. The city sprawled below her like a kingdom she quietly conquered. No nervousness, no second-guessing, just calm, focus, and tension. At 2 p.m., her team arrived. Marcus had brought 3 dress options, each more stunning than the last. But Claire knew immediately which one was right. Midnight blue silk that caught the light like water, custom-made by an Italian designer who usually had a 2-year waiting list. Simple, elegant, devastating. The kind of dress that doesn't scream for attention, but commands it anyway. Jewelry minimal but impeccable. A single strand of South Sea pearls that had belonged to Mrs. Carter, gifted to Claire on the day her company went public. Diamond studs so perfectly cut, they seemed to contain entire galaxies. Her hair, swept into a classic low bun that exposed her neck and shoulders. Elegant, timeless, powerful. Makeup, flawless but natural. The kind of beauty that looks effortless but requires exceptional skill. By 5:30 p.m., Claire stood before the full-length mirror in her suite. The woman staring back wasn't the girl Daniel had left. She was something else entirely. Marcus stepped back, admiring his work. "You're going to stop hearts tonight." Claire smiled softly. "That's not the goal." "Maybe not," Jennifer said from the doorway, "but it's going to happen anyway." The plan, Claire checked her watch. 4:45 p.m. The ceremony would start at 6 o'clock. Guests had been instructed to arrive by 5:30, which meant she was late, intentionally. "Ready?" Jennifer asked. Claire took one last look at herself in the mirror. Not the broken woman who'd left that apartment 8 years ago with a duffel bag. Not the waitress Daniel assumed she still was, but Claire Laurent, billionaire, entrepreneur, self-made woman, and most importantly, free. "Ready?" she said. Her team gathered her things. Security did a final check. The hotel's private elevator was standing by. The world was about to see who she had become. But more importantly, so was Daniel. And nothing in his carefully curated fantasy had prepared him for the woman who was about to walk through those doors. The revelation was about to begin. T.O. see what she missed. He wanted her to see him win. He imagined her arriving in a cheap dress, sitting quietly at the back, invisible. But what he didn't know was that the tables had turned. When Claire received the invitation, she didn't hesitate. Not for revenge, but for closure. She booked a suite in the same hotel. Her team arranged her entrance. The world would finally see who she had become. The perfect stage. The day arrived like any other wedding day. Except this wasn't any other wedding. The Imperial Grand Ballroom had been transformed into something out of fairy tale. Or perhaps more accurately, a magazine spread designed to make everyone else feel inadequate. Golden chandeliers, 18 of them, each worth more than a luxury car, cast warm amber light across the space, making everything glow in almost otherworldly radiance. White roses by the thousands, flown in from Ecuador that morning, arranged in cascading displays that must have required an army of florists working through the night. Silk draping in cream and gold hung from the 30-foot ceilings, creating the illusion of an elegant tent within the already opulent ballroom. Round tables dressed in the finest linens, each centerpiece a small fortune in flowers and crystal. And the cameras. So many cameras. Professional photographers Daniel had hired document every moment. Videographers with cinema-quality equipment. And of course, the phones hunted them, held by guests eager to capture content for their social media feeds. The ceremony space faced floor, the ceiling windows overlooking the city at sunset. Perfect lighting, perfect backdrop, perfect everything. 500 guests had arrived in their designer best. Air kissing and networking and sipping champagne that cost more per bottle than most people spend on groceries in a month. The string quartet played Vivaldi. Conversation hummed at that particular frequency of wealthy people discussing expensive things. Daniel stood near the front, greeting important guests with the kind of confident smile that comes from believing you finally made it. His tuxedo was custom Armani. His watch was Patek Philippe. His hair was perfectly styled. Amanda moved the crowd like the society princess. She was elegant, poised, her dressing confection of white lace and silk that had been featured in bridal magazines before she even wore it. Everything was going according to plan. The ceremony would begin in 8 minutes, and then the disruption, silence. Not the gentle hush of ceremony beginning, but the sudden absolute silence of 500 people collectively holding their breath. It started at the back of the room, near the main entrance, and spread like a shockwave, heads turning, conversation stopping mid-sentence, champagne glasses pausing halfway to lips. Something had changed in the room's energy, something electric, something impossible to ignore. A woman had stepped through the doors. The vision, she was tall, though perhaps it was just the way she carried herself, like someone who'd learned that confidence adds inches. Elegant in a way that seemed effortless, but was actually a result of meticulous preparation and exceptional taste. And the gown, dear God, the gown. Midnight blue, not the navy you see everywhere, but a deep, rich blue that seemed to shift and shimmer with every movement, like liquid starlight had been spun into fabric. The kind of blue you see in the deepest part of the ocean or the sky, just after sunset. Custom made, obviously. The fit was too perfect. Too precise to be anything off the rack. It hugged her figure in all the right places, then flowed elegantly to the floor in a way that suggested water, movement, grace. One shoulder exposed, the other covered, a daring but tasteful slit that revealed just enough leg when she walked. Fabric that caught the chandelier light and seemed to glow from within. Simple, devastating. The kind of dress that makes every other woman in the room immediately recalculate their own outfit choices. Her hair was swept up, exposing a graceful neck adorned with a single strand of luminous pearls. Diamond earrings caught the light with every subtle movement of her head. But it wasn't just the dress or the jewelry or the styling. It was her, the way she held herself, the calm, quiet confidence that radiated from her like heat from a flame, the slight smile playing at her lips, not nervous, not performative, but genuinely at peace. She looked like royalty. She looked like power. She looked like someone who belonged in rooms far more important than this one. The recognition, Claire. It took the room a moment to process it, because the Claire they remembered, the few who even remembered her at all, had been so different. Quiet, plain, forgettable. The woman standing in the doorway was none of those things. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd, like wind through wheat. Who is that? She's stunning. Is she a model? Maybe an actress? Daniel knows celebrities? The whispers grew louder, multiplying, spreading from table to table, group to group. And then, the freeze near the front of the room, Daniel had frozen mid-sentence. He'd been talking to one of Amanda's uncles, something about quarterly projections, the kind of boring business talk that makes you sound important at weddings. His mouth had been moving, words forming until they just stopped. His face went through a series of expressions in rapid succession. Confusion. Surely not. Couldn't be recognition. Wait, those eyes. That smile. Shock. It is her. But how? But disbelief. This doesn't make sense. This is impossible. And underneath it all, something he wouldn't admit even himself. Fear. His hand tightened around his champagne glass. Color drained his face despite the warm lighting. His perfectly styled hair suddenly seemed ridiculous, his expensive tuxedo inadequate. Because standing in that doorway, commanding the attention of every single person in the room, without saying a word, was a woman he'd left behind. In a cramped apartment, with a duffel bag. Except she wasn't that woman anymore. She was something else entirely, and she was walking toward him. The approach. Claire moved the room with unhurried grace, not rushing, not hiding, just walking at a natural pace, as if she attended billion-dollar weddings every weekend. And this was nothing special. The crowd parted for her automatically. People stepped aside without thinking about it, creating a clear path like she was a ship cutting through water. And as she moved, more people recognized her. Oh my God, is that? It can't be. Cameras flashed. Not the polite occasional flash of wedding photos, but the aggressive, rapid-fire flash of people recognizing someone important and scrambling to capture proof. Professional photographers who'd been hired to shoot the ceremony turned their lenses toward Claire instead. They knew news when they saw it. Social media influencers in the crowd immediately started filming, their content instincts kicking in. Several reporters who'd been covering the wedding and society event, because Amanda's family warranted that kind of attention, suddenly pushed forward, their entertainment coverage transforming into something bigger. One of them, a young woman from a local style magazine, reached Claire first. "Excuse me, can we get your name? Are you a friend of the bride or groom?" Claire paused, turning toward the small crowd of media with that same serene smile. "I'm just an old friend," she said, her voice clear and warm and utterly calm, "here to celebrate their happiness." The reporters scribbled notes, snapped photos, recorded audio. Behind them, guests were pulling out their phones, typing frantically. Someone had already searched her face on Google image recognition. The revelation begins. The whispers start to change. Wait, isn't that? Check the business section from last month. Oh my God, I think that's Claire Lauren. Claire Lauren, the founder of... No way. I asked her. Look, phones lit up around the room as people searched, and what they found again spreading faster than any formal announcement could have. Articles, Forbes lists, business profiles, magazine covers. Claire Lauren, the billionaire you've never heard of. How one woman built a luxury empire in under a decade. Claire Lauren's net worth surpasses $1.2 billion. Someone whispered to their table. She's the founder of Carter Luxe. Another voice, wait, Carter Luxe, that's huge. She's a billionaire. A self-made billionaire under 40. The whispers became waves, building and crashing and spreading throughout the ballroom. People started noticing details they'd missed before. The dress Claire wore? They recognized it now. It was from Milan Fashion Week. Custom couture, probably 6 figures. Those pearls? Not costume jewelry. South Sea pearls, museum quality. Even the way she carried herself, they understood now. That wasn't just confidence. That was the bearing of someone who'd sat across from CEOs and investors and hadn't blinked. The confrontation. Claire continued her approach, weaving through tables with elegant precision until she stood directly in front of Daniel. He looked like a man who just watched his entire reality ship beneath his feet, his mouth open, closed, opened again. She waited, that slight smile never leaving her face. Patient, calm. Finally, he managed to speak, his voice coming out strangled and small. You came. It wasn't a greeting. It was barely even a sentence, just a statement of disbelief. Claire nodded gracefully, her expression warm and genuinely pleased. Of course, she said simply. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The words hung in the air between them. Wouldn't miss it for the world. For years ago, he would have said the same thing about their relationship, right before he destroyed it. The electric moment. The tension in that moment was electric. Every person with an earshot had gone silent, straining to hear. The string quartet had stopped playing. Even the servers had frozen. Champagne bottles suspended mid-pour. Daniel stood there, his brain clearly scrambling to process what he was seeing, trying to reconcile the woman before him with his memories, with his assumptions, with the cruel story he told himself about making the right choice. Amanda had appeared aside now, her smile faltering slightly as she registered the way Daniel was looking at this mystery woman. Daniel. Amanda's voice held a question. Who is this? Before Daniel could answer, before he could figure out how to answer, another ripple of recognition moved through the crowd, the domino effect. People were still searching on their phones. And the information they found kept getting more shocking. Carter Luxe just partnered with. She's on the board of a charity Work Alone. Wait, look at the guest list from that tech summit last year. She was named one of the most influential. Someone at a nearby table gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The champagne. She whispered urgently to her husband. Look at the label. Carter Imports. That's her subsidiary. Her husband's eyes widened. He grabbed his phone, searching frantically. The flowers, he said, voice shaking. Laura on luxury goods. She owns a company that supplied the flowers, the dress fabric. Another guest added, having overheard, Carter Textiles. Within minutes, the whispers became waves, became a tsunami of realization. The poor ex-girlfriend Daniel had wanted to humiliate the woman he'd imagined arriving in a cheap dress and sitting in the shadows. The person he'd pitted and dismissed owned companies that had supplied half the luxury goods at his own wedding. The father's recognition, and then cutting through the noise, a voice full of shock and something approaching panic. Miss Lauren. Everyone turned. Marcus Whitfield, Amanda's father, the real estate tycoon, the man whose wealth and connections Daniel had been desperately trying to impress for the past year, was staring at Claire with an expression that had transformed in seconds. Pride had become panic. Confidence had become concern because Marcus Whitfield recognized Claire. Of course he did. 6 months ago, his company had pitched her on a major development deal. luxury retail spaces for Carter Luxe's flagship stores. They wanted her business desperately. She turned them down, politely but firmly. She'd explained that their proposed terms weren't favorable, their sustainability commitments weren't strong enough, and frankly, she had better offers from 3 competing developers. Marcus had tried everything. Better terms, personal appeals, leveraging every connection he had. She'd been immovable, and now she was here, at his daughter's wedding, smiling that serene smile, and suddenly Marcus was recalculating everything. His expression shifted from panic to something worse, forced, desperate friendliness. "Miss Lauren," he repeated, moving toward with his hand extended, his voice pitched just slightly too loud, too enthusiastic. "Wait, what a pleasant surprise. I had no idea you'd be attending. If I'd known, we would have." He trailed off, realizing mid-sentence that anything he said next would sound either insincere or obsequious. Claire took his hand gracefully, her grip firm and brief. "Mr. Whitfield," she acknowledged her professional courtesy. "Congratulations on your daughter's wedding. It's a beautiful event." The unspoken subtext screamed through the silence. "Though perhaps you should be more careful about who you invited." The spreading wildfire by now. The revelation had spread to every corner of the ballroom. Guests were clustered in groups, phones out, sharing articles and photos and net worth estimates. Self-made billionaire. Youngest woman on the Forbes list. She started with nothing, waitressed her way through, built everything from scratch. The society wives who'd been ready to dismiss her as a party crasher were now remembering how they'd been trying to get their daughters internships at Carter Luxe for years. The business executives were recalculating their networking strategies, wondering how to engineer an introduction. The influencers were already posting, their captions dripping with sudden enthusiasm, when a literal billionaire shows up to the wedding face, screaming in fear. And through it all, Claire stood calm and centered, still smiling that peaceful smile, while Daniel looked like a man watching his entire carefully constructed narrative collapse around him, while Amanda's face reflected growing confusion and concern, while Marcus Whitfield desperately tried to figure out how to salvage whatever business relationship might still be possible. The woman Daniel had wanted to humiliate had just become the most important person in the room, and she hadn't even tried. She'd simply arrived, the ceremony of the forced beginning. After what felt like an eternity of stunned silence and frantic whispers, the wedding coordinator, a woman who'd organized hundreds of high society events and prided herself on maintaining composure, finally managed to restore some semblance of order. The string quartet resumed playing. Guests returned reluctantly to their seats, though every eye kept darting toward Claire, who had gracefully taken a seat near the middle of the room, not in the back, where Daniel had imagined her hiding, but not ostentatiously in front either. Just present, visible, impossible to ignore. Daniel stood at the altar, his best man whispering urgent questions that he couldn't seem to process. His face had gone from pale to flushed, a sheen of perspiration visible on his forehead. Despite the ballroom's perfect climate control, the officiate, an older priest who'd married dozens of society couples and thought he'd seen everything, cleared his throat and tried to begin. But the energy in the room had fundamentally changed. What should have been a celebration felt more like a trial. What should have been Daniel's moment of triumph felt like an autopsy of his judgment. The procession. The bridesmaids came down the aisle, their practiced smiles looking increasingly forced as they registered attention. The flower girls scattered petals mechanically, confused by the strange atmosphere. And then the music swelled for Amanda's entrance. She appeared in the doorway, a vision in white lace and silk, a dress that cost more than most cars, her veil trailing behind her like a cloud under normal circumstances. Every hour would have been on her. But today, at least half the room kept glancing between Amanda and Claire, making silent comparisons that Amanda could feel even through her veil. Her father walked beside her, his jaw tight, his hand gripping her arm, perhaps a bit too firmly because Marcus Whitfield was doing calculations in his head, and none of them were good. The business merger he planned with Daniel's firm suddenly questionable. The social capital he'd expected from this union now complicated. The narrative of his daughter marrying up completely inverted. His daughter was marrying a man whose ex-girlfriend could buy and sell their entire family fortune 3 times over. They reached the altar, Marcus handed Amanda to Daniel, and in that moment their eyes met future father-in-law and groom, and something passed between them, a recognition, a reckoning. What have you gotten us into? The vows. The ceremony proceeded like a play where everyone had forgotten their lines. The priest spoke about love and commitment, but his words seemed to echo hollow in a vast space. Daniel repeated his vows, but his voice cracked twice. His eyes kept drifting past Amanda, searching the crowd, landing on Claire, then skittering away like he'd looked at the sun. Amanda's vows were letter perfect. She'd practiced them for weeks, but even she seemed to sense that something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't her day anymore. She wasn't even the most important woman in the room, and she could feel it in every pitying glance from guests, in every whisper sighed. In a way, even her own mother kept glancing nervously toward where Claire sat. The rings were exchanged. The priest smiled, preparing for his favorite part of any ceremony. And then the question, if anyone here has reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. It's a formality, a tradition. In modern weddings, no one actually objects. It's just words, a vestige of older times, something to be said and quickly move past. But in this ballroom, at this moment, those words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Every single person in that room held their breath. 500 people frozen. All eyes turned slowly, inexorably toward Claire. She sat perfectly still, her posture elegant and relaxed, her expression serene. She didn't move, didn't speak, didn't stand or raise her hand or interrupt. She simply smiled a small, knowing smile that held entire volumes of unspoken truth. And then, with that same unhurried grace she'd shown all evening, she stood. The collective intake of breath was audible. Daniel's face went absolutely white. Amanda turned, her veil shifting. The priest's mouth hung open mid-sentence. But Claire didn't speak. She didn't object. She didn't declare her feelings or make a dramatic proclamation, or do any things that 500 people suddenly, desperately wanted to see. Instead, she simply gathered her small clutch, smoothed her gown with one elegant hand, and began walking toward the exit. Her heels clicked softly on the marble floor. Click, 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 each step echoing in the absolute silence. She moved through a frozen tableau of guests, past the elaborate floor arrangements, past the golden chandeliers, past all of Daniel's carefully curated symbols of success. And she walked out. The doors closed behind her with a soft final sound. For a long moment, no one moved. And then the unraveling. The whispers started like a match striking in darkness. Soft at first, then spreading, then roaring into inferno. Did she just? She objected without saying a word. That was brutal. Did you see Daniel's face? This is insane. I need to post about this. The priest tried to continue, his voice shaking slightly. Well then, by the power vested in me. But no one was listening anymore. The ceremony completed mechanically, rings fully exchanged, the official kiss performed for cameras. The pronouncement made Mr. and Mrs. Daniel Morrison. But it felt like a performance at an empty theater. The applause was scattered and half-hearted. Because everyone in that room understood what had just happened, Claire hadn't objected to the marriage. She'd simply demonstrated, with one perfectly executed exit, that it didn't matter. That she had better places to be. The reception began with all the planned elements. The first dance, the speeches, the elaborate dinner service. But it was like watching a meticulously planned parade that everyone knew had already been rained out. Guests picked at their expensive meals and spoke in hushed tones. The photographers, sensing the real story, had already left to file their photos. And phones, everywhere, phones. Guests weren't posting the usual wedding content, toast and dance floor shots and romantic couple photos. They were posting about her, about the mystery billionaire who'd appeared and disappeared like an avenging angel, about the uncomfortable tension and Daniel's visible shock, about the rumors now spreading like wildfire through the ballroom and beyond. The media storm. Within 20 minutes, the story hit social media. Within an hour, it was on gossip blogs. By the time Daniel and Amanda cut their cake, both smiling with gritted teeth for cameras they now feared, legitimate news outlets were picking it up. Business Insider. Billionaire Claire Laurent makes a surprise appearance at ex-partner's wedding, Forbes. The wedding entrance that broke the internet. When your ex becomes a billionaire. Vanity Fair. Society wedding takes unexpected turn as tech CEO walks out mid-ceremony. The cut, the most devastating no comment in wedding history. The headlines wrote themselves. Journalists dug into the story, finding the old connection, the timeline, the dramatic reversal of fortune. Groom's ex-wife worth more than bride's family combined. From rags to riches. How Claire Laurent built an empire after heartbreak. The wedding that revealed $1 billion glow-up. Twitter exploded. TikTok creators broke down the timeline. Instagram was flooded with memes and commentary. Hashtag Claire Laurent trended worldwide. And with the media attention came scrutiny of everything else. Sometimes life doesn't need revenge. It just needs growth and patience. He tried to disgrace her, but fate wrote a better story. So next time someone underestimates you, remember Claire and keep building quietly. Because when success speaks, even your silence is deafening. What do you think? Was she right to show up, or should she have stayed away? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear another story that will leave your jaw on the floor, click on the next video. Because what happens, it will change how you see betrayal forever.